Greetings, everyone. My name is Philomena O'Brien, and we're glad you could join us today for the PrimeVigilance webinar titled How to Adapt Hosting, Conduction of Remote Audits and Inspections. Before we commence, I'd like to run through a couple of quick housekeeping matters. Firstly, we expect this webinar presentation to run for approximately 30 minutes, with a short amount of time for questions and answers at the end. And secondly, you're very welcome to send us your questions at any point throughout the presentation. You can do this by typing them into the question and answer section that you'll see on your screen. And now, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Ejaz Butt, PrimeVigilance's Director of Audit Management. Ejaz, I'll let you take it over from here.
Okay, many thanks. So I will start off discussing a little bit of background around the regulations and the requirements for QA oversight of the entire PV system, including all touchpoints with PV. So this discussion and our webinar today will be talking about the conduct and the hosting of remote PV audits and hosting of inspections. So first of all, back to basics and the definitions around what is a typical inspection or an audit. An audit is a systematic, disciplined, independent, and documented process for obtaining evidence and evaluating the evidence objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled, contributing to the improvement of risk management, control, and governance processes. These are our familiar GVP EMA-based definition of audits, but of course, especially according to the pandemic situation, we're having to conduct a lot of our audits remotely and host audits and inspections remotely as well. There is little details about remote-based audits and inspections. So there's some guidance based in GCP, some on GMP, and so we're going to be putting all of those together to advise and guide the listeners today on how to best prepare for an audit if you are hosting or even conducting audits and also hosting inspections. So according to the EMA GCP guidance on remote GCP inspections, the process is conducting inspections at a distance, virtually, supported by the technology or communicating, sharing, reviewing, and developing documentation and accessing systems without physically being present at the sites where the activities subjected to an inspection have taken place. So the differences between on-site and remote is simply the physical presence of the auditor and the inspector. So what reasons would we want to conduct pharmacovigilance audits remotely? This could be a variety of different situations such as natural disasters, high criminality areas, pandemics, travel security issues at the audit location, transport restrictions to the audit location, and also low-risk parties. So we all risk assess our auditable entities in our audit universe. Certain low-risk entities would not require a physical on-site presence, so a remote approach would be utilized, as well as audits of narrow scope. So all of these aspects could justify the remote conduct of an audit or inspection. And certainly these justifications need to be documented and have a logical process of reaching those risk assessments. There could be financial restraints to a certain extent. However, usually financial restraints are not seen to be a good justification for conducting audits remotely. There has to be other reasons involved, as we have described. So the Food and Drug Administration released a lot of guidance as well as other regulatory authorities, and we are going to just summarize a few of those to piece together the best practices and approaches that we could utilize in our PV audits and inspections. So these guidances and documentation that have been released are not necessarily strictly GVP or PV based, but are principles that we could utilize and get some tips and tools out of. So on 11th of May 2020, the guidance from the FDA discussed about their alternative inspection tools and approaches. They were thinking of planning to postpone domestic and foreign routine surveillance inspections during the pandemic, focusing more on mission critical inspections, which could be identified on a case by case basis. These would be conducted with appropriate safety measures in place, and the inspections as part of a robust and multi-pronged approach to oversight of safety and quality. So audit inspections, although they're critical and can gauge a lot of information during the inspection and audit process, but they only form part of a multiple different activities that we can do in QA to ensure the oversight of safety and quality. Furthermore, during the pandemic, the industry and FDA workforces also may be reduced. This could be due to high employee absenteeism, as well as the increased adverse event reporting, which can need to pull in those resources from the FDA. So the FDA guidance also described the process of developing a continuity of operations plan, COOP, to be in place. And this also can be utilized in your own company. The CEOP should consider the total number of global sites are affected in your organization and also account for any resource challenges. So documenting the high absenteeism or other factors that could prevent the adherence to downstream adverse event regulatory reporting requirements, these need to be all documented, and a plan should be envisaged on how to cope with those type of challenges so that we could meet our adherence of those regulatory reporting requirements. So documenting is going to be a key factor throughout the presentation, and planning and preparation is also vital in this pandemic situation. Certainly, the EMA have also released some guidance around conducting clinical trials during the pandemic. So although this particular guidance released on 20th of March 2020 focused on the impact on patient safety, data efficacy, the reduction of the burden of medical staff themselves, but also the document provides a good framework on how audits can be more dynamic in this situation, ensuring the adequate oversight of all of the safety aspects and pharmacovigilance systems. So it's worth looking into that guidance documentation for some ideas. On 10th of April 2020, there was a Q&A document released, and certainly section 6.7, sorry, audits and internal audits. This particular section discussed about the reliance on paper-based audits, taking into consideration the results of other inspections and audits to complement your intelligence of quality assurance and building on that intelligent base. So it also discusses remote audits that could provide confidence if you outsource any activities with a contracted party, that they are fit for purpose and it will not negatively affect any kind of activity in the company, such as distribution and a supply. And these principles are also useful to acknowledge for PV. Your internal audit schedule needs to be adapted to be able to free up resources and also ramp up resource in areas of high risk and critical areas. So this is dependent upon your risk assessment program. Each situation should be assessed, documented, and authorized on a risk-based approach. And certainly, when the situation is over and you're re-inspected, these type of aspects and documentation will be scrutinized. So continuing with the EMA, on 10th June 2020, further guidance was provided on remote inspections during the COVID-19 situation. These were, again, GCP related. However, similar principles can also be applied to pharmacovigilance as a guideline on what protest steps to be incorporated into your process in your company and organization. Impact analysis and feasibility assessment is important. It gives you an idea of where to focus and what the risks are, as long as they follow a logical methodology. You need to be able to review your computer systems. So during any kind of inspection, you need to check your confidentiality policies in your company and what you're allowed to share, what data, and what is bound by confidentiality. Remote inspections could be longer in duration than on-site inspections, and certainly the location of your team can add to the challenges. So we need to have the ability to dial into the same teleconference and account for different locations of the individuals in your team. You need to assess technical requirements and definitely utilize the variety of different apps and video conferencing, interactive tools, messaging, and document sharing applications that are available. The inspection agenda would be very detailed, so this will also assist both parties in a successful inspection. Opening meetings and closing meetings will be key, and this will be utilized to introduce the process and also provide feedback as applicable. The MHRA also released some guidance on 20th March 2020 and then the requirement of a risk-based prioritization of their GXP inspections across GXPs. So they would focus on essential on-site GXP inspections during the pandemic and replace any non-essential on-site with remote office-based assessment again. The office-based inspections is not new to the organization for the MHRA. They have done many hybrid inspections in the past, similar on a similar setup. So they're quite used to conducting these. The MHRA will request an organization to provide electronic copies of documentation and other information for off-site review. Follow-up will be conducted via emails and teleconferences where necessary. On-site inspections will be then rescheduled when travel restrictions will lift. Pharmaceutical Inspections Cooperation Scheme Group also get together to share intelligence between other global inspectorates and partners and other regulators, and then this will allow them to share inspection information throughout their network, and this can also benefit and add intelligence to their inspection program. So moving on to how we prepare for our audit and inspection. So preparatory training program is a very good idea, and most companies do this, and it offers the training part of the employees in your organization, and all the functions that would be most likely pulled into an audit or inspection. Training should be covered to all those individuals. The training should be extended to also touch points with PV. So this could include regulatory department, medical affairs, product quality, medical information. These are just for a few examples of touch points with PV. So it's worth expanding out to those touch points, even if you believe that they may not be incorporated into the inspection process. It's a good idea to have that training conducted and also documented. So training should typically cover how to have a desktop policy. So, for example, when it's an on-site one, we are familiar with our clear desktop policy. It's also a good idea to look at our virtual desktop and see if how we could prevent any kind of situation where we accidentally or inadvertently share documentation that's open on the screen, and we need to be certain that during the inspection or audit process, at least, we have a clear virtual desktop policy as well. Company procedures need to be reviewed related to audits and inspection and hosting. So every organization typically has some kind of procedure that involves hosting of audits, and this should be the main focal point of the training program. We should run over soft skills in inspection interviews. Technical knowledge and procedural familiarities, because we are so used to day-to-day activities, we do sometimes forget the detail steps in the SOP. So providing a refresher on that would be useful. And also, training programs can include role-play scenarios. So the agenda is an important tool during your preparation. It will form the basis of the structure of the audit and inspection. You should be able to identify time zones for all participants, as we discussed that people will be at different sites and possibly in different locations or countries, and we have to account for all the time zones to be transparent on the agenda so everybody knows what time to dial into their session. There needs to be a bit of rigor and discipline required for the agenda continuation, the start and stop times and continuation, and also, as well as any agenda items that are prolonged or shortened. So good communication needs to be sent out to all participants of timing changes. Document sharing is the center point of the audit inspection, and as well as adherence to company policies. So all electronic documents should be stored and shared through a document sharing portal where applicable, and audit trail security and restricted access is advised. Furthermore, on documentation and preparation, provision of certain documentation in advance of the conduct can also be useful where possible to allow the auditor inspection to review some certain documentation in advance of the audit. It will help them to prepare. It will also help lessen the burden of documentation review during the conduct. All documentation should undergo some kind of quality control without necessarily holding up the process of provision during the conduct. All documentation should be prepared, filed logically in a coding and numbering system, which could match the auditor and inspector's numbering system to assist them as well. The QC of the documentation should ensure that the documents match the request and that we are not providing any documentation outside the scope of the request. The document logging form should contain columns such as document ID, the document title, requester's initials, date and time of request, as well as the QC conducted, their initials, and also the date or time being provided. Audio conferencing. So there's a lot of usage of video and audio conferencing technology, and certainly we are using them during our day-to-day work that we are doing recently during the pandemic situation. So use of industry-wide technology can be useful if you're an auditor. It can be using familiar technology that your auditees are also familiar with can allow for ease of use. Conducting a test session with external participants is advisable to mitigate any technological problems that would occur on the conduct day. If there's any issues related to the setup of the computers, or also any additional software that need to be downloaded, that could be all done in advance. Use of the video conferencing can be useful, particularly during opening and closing meetings, but it's advised to stick with at least the audio options as attendees drop in and out of sessions, and it also enables the stability of the internet bandwidth so that it's not a burden on the internet bandwidth by having the video capabilities as well. If possible, have a backup option. Share some telephone details or mobile details, or even another TC service or a dial-in option in case of any problems during the audit and inspection. So conduct skills. So we talked about soft skills in the training programs. These are very important. It's very important to be professional as you represent the company, an organization, either as an auditor with a consultancy or a host representing your organization. And be courteous at all times. Provide intentional pauses between sentences. Ensure that you're speaking clear and at a comfortable pace. And also frequently ask if there was any misunderstanding or any clarifications required. Avoid overlapping of discussions between your team members. So this is also part of the training and the soft skills program. Allow one speaker to speak at a time. mitigate any confusion by repeating a particular question if it wasn't clear, and also try not to repeat your own answers multiple times if unless it was requested. This can intentionally and inadvertently prolong sessions, and be aware that confusions can lead to findings. So we want to be sure that we are clear and accurate with our information that we provide. Allow the auditor inspector to make notes. So there will be silences. So you don't feel obliged to fill those awkward silences with additional information. Allow them to take notes and then speak when a question is posed. On-screen video demonstrations could also be requested. It's always useful to have those requests in advance, so that either the host or the auditor can be prepared. The video conferencing can be used in situations where you're sharing the demonstration of a database or a particular tool. Software such as electronic documentation management databases, e-learning systems, safety databases, and as well as the tools that we use day to day, like Excel trackers and forms. Ensure where possible, like I say, for these requests to be made in advance, we should be able to demonstrate at least templates where possible, if not the actual documentation. So the Excel templates or the form templates, just to describe how the process is being carried out, what fields are being entered, and ensure any confidentiality data is redacted. And you can able to demonstrate a test system in some circumstances rather than a live database, or a sample or test case, adverse event case as applicable. So that all of these ideas can be utilized if it's purely a demonstration that we want to provide. Always maintain a collaborative approach. This works in favor of both parties. It ensures smoothness of the running of the audit and inspection, and also allows for transparency and clarifications that can be made more easily when there's a collaborative relationship. The agenda, as I mentioned, is an important tool and driver for the conduct. So sticking to the agenda items and being aware of the sessions and agreeing to them, the scope and also the participants, that helps a lot in this remote audit conduct process. The agenda should be constructed in a manner that allows for a good flow of the audit conduct. There are frequent breakout sessions built into it, and there are daily feedback sessions as well. We should also build in document review sessions where possible. The audit and inspection coordinator in your organization should communicate to colleagues if sessions overrun, finish early, so that participants can join in a timely manner. So from the auditor's perspective, you need to maintain control of the audit at all times. You need to be able to resolve technological issues promptly, and that's where the backup and the preparation will help. So keep the auditees informed of the progress at all times, whether you need to move to documentation review or there are more requests coming through and you can envisage interviewing more people. Keeping the auditees informed of progress will help manage the process. Update the auditees regarding any timing changes, any additional discussions that can be added on as ad hoc with additional interviewees should be, it obviously can happen, and so these things need to be communicated smoothly and in a timely manner, and also providing regular feedback on how the audit is progressing. Points to consider for the host. You need to be considerate of the on-site versus remote preparations. So there will be differences in those preparations. For example, training the staff, as we discussed in the training preparation program, making sure the SOPs are up to date. So these are always done in both scenarios, so that we should continue. There should be no difference in that preparation step. Training records, CVs, and job descriptions need to be up to date. And also QA representatives need to be present and available. So somebody at hand to dial in frequently. That could be a couple of individuals in the team or one person dedicated to that task. So your standard operating procedures should stipulate the company standards to be followed for the conduct of remote audits. So if we don't have a procedure already, that should you should always have a audit or an inspection hosting procedure. Equally, ensuring remote audits are covered in the auditing SOP. This will help with consistency in the conduct of such audits. So just to summarize, so for hosting remote audits and inspections, preparation is key. The agenda tool is your friend, and it's utilized to help you as much as the auditor and inspector. Testing technology is vital, and documentation in the organization and of all the processes and job descriptions and CVs, provision and logging of these are vital as well. So you can look back and know exactly what document was provided and when, and you have evidence of that. Conducting remote audits, if you're an auditor, you need to be able to plan ahead. Again, testing technology is vital. Your soft skills should be fine-tuned and practiced. And again, the agenda is also the auditor's and inspector's friend as well. So it's a tool that is vital during the whole process of the remote audit or inspection. PrimeVigilance have a number of clients who we obviously support their audit process. We are audited on a frequent basis, and certainly we have the capabilities to support any remote audit on behalf of our client. We already have established robust platforms which allow the ease of attendance at sessions for participants. We have dedicated quality support team. We have document sharing technologies that we could utilize, and also a variety of tools, including document requests, logs, and forms. If our clients do not have these, then we are able to provide them for them. We have very responsive subject matter experts, so all of the training and preparation that I discussed are equally conducted at PrimeVigilance. So the SMEs in different functions that are applicable to the scope of the audit will be on hand to provide any answers to our clients during our audits. And we are able to cater for all time zones. We also provide audits as a service with a global auditing reach, as well as a portfolio of highly qualified quality assurance and PV experts. We have robust audit procedures and forms which are tailored, and standardized questionnaires can be developed as well. And we have all of these forms and templates in-house as required. We have a dedicated independent quality team and dedicated contracts and proposal team that will help ensure a smooth uh, formal approach to the administration side and the financial side of the setup of the project. We have the ability to manage full audit programs as well as cater for supporting ad hoc audits. We have a complete management of audit process end to end, from intent of notification to the auditees, right up to the corrective action, preventative action, CAPA response reviews. And just to put a final statement on that, so PrimeVigilance offers a friendly, cooperative, consultative support to help and guide you through the entire audit process. So I'll hand back to Philomena, and we'll take any questions and answers.
Thank you, Ejaz. So I can see we have quite a few questions lined up. Let's see if we can answer some of them now while we still have a little bit of time left. Okay, first I'll read out a question we've received from a pharmaceutical company which is based in the US. The question is, do we follow our usual procedures for on-site audits and inspections management? Ejaz, can I pass to you?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question, and certainly we need to follow procedures. And the on-site, if you have a procedure which is specifically tailored to on-site audits and inspections, that can be followed. The only difference in the whole process is the physical presence of the auditor and inspector. However, as I mentioned before, there's a little bit more information and steps that we need to include. So if your SOPs do not have the steps related to specifically remote audits, then it's advisable to incorporate those steps into your either existing SOP, or you can have an additional SOP to complement it. But yes, definitely follow your procedures, and it's advisable to include remote audit step preparation and conduct into that SOP as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, next we have a question from a European service provider. Actually, this is two parts in the question. So, when does the audit or inspection close in a typical remote conduct? And how long is the provision of documents or information after the audit or inspection?
Okay, again, another great question. So I'll answer the first part initially. So the audit closeout should be defined by the auditor themselves, and that would be typically when all of the information has been provided satisfactorily to the auditor, and they deem that the audit is now closed. However, it kind of links to the second part of the question as well, which is when does the provision of documentation end? So if there are any additional documentation required and or information, such as outstanding questions, then a mutual agreement between the auditee and auditor should be established, where we have a cutoff date for providing further information, so that there is a hard stop and the process of audit report writing can then continue. So this should be mutually agreed between the two parties. It may typically occur 3 working days after the audit conduct closeout, and sometimes it can also mean that there's an additional closeout meeting just to summarize the additional information that was received.
Great, thank you. Okay, finally, just while we have a few minutes left, how about a question now from an EU-based pharma company? The question is, how do we manage the tour of facilities during a remote audit or inspection?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's something that we are so used to during an on-site inspection or an audit. As an auditor, I do request to see the archive rooms, the IT server rooms, and there's a lot of things that we need to check physically. That could be challenging, but there's a lot of things that we could do to provide reassurances that the facilities are capable of storage of documentation, and server rooms are fully equipped. So if you have any documentation from your office facilities department that could supplement the answers that you provide, such as any kind of pest control or fireproofing or waterproofing that's available in the facilities and in the rooms, those documentations could be provided, and certainly should be part of the preparation process, because we need to expect that those areas will be covered. Equally with the IT systems as well, and usually with the IT systems, those documentations are readily available, or should be readily available from the IT department, whether they have air conditioning systems in place, whether there's testing of the air conditioning, as well as backup on electricity and generators. All of these documentations can be placed. I've also been personally in a situation where I've been provided with photographs, as well as a virtual tour, so a camera following the host around the facilities in those particular locations. So these type of things can be covered, and covered quite successfully now that we have the technology. Thank you.
Thanks, Ejaz. That's a great answer. Unfortunately, this is all we have time for today. We'd like to answer everyone who has taken the time to ask a question here. So we'll endeavour to reply personally via email to all outstanding questions by the end of this week. To conclude our webinar session for today, we'd like to thank everyone once again for joining us. We really hope you found this webinar useful. And to remind you, the webinar will be available for download from the PrimeVigilance and Ergomed websites from tomorrow. Plus, we'll also make sure there's a link in our next newsletter. This ends our webinar. Thank you very much for attending.